Neo-Marxist view of the role of the police and courts is that they're critical of the role of the police and the criminal justice system in general. They believe they serve the needs and interests of the ruling class. Stuart Hall's study on mugging, so the media focused on this crime, the police and courts, based on the guidelines given by the government, where the Home Secretary at the time, in the 1970s, said there was a 122% increase in muggings. It became a problem at the top of the political and policing agenda, which, according to neo-Marxists, Stuart Hall, served to distract attention from the legitimation crisis in capitalism, where the economic system was seen as problematic, and so they had to make it seem acceptable, so distracting attention from the problems of unemployment and poverty by focusing on black crime. The neo-Marxist view is influenced by Marxism because it focuses on the economic system of capitalism, which creates poverty, which is the context in which people choose to commit crimes. The idea that people can make choices to commit crimes as a political act, in other words, something that could be seen as an act against the system, shows the influence of interactionism over neo-Marxists. It shows that they believe human beings have agency and are able to make choices when committing crimes, and it's based on the meanings in their mind. For example, a freedom fighter, someone might see themselves as a freedom fighter. They might be defined as a terrorist by others in society, so it's important to explore and understand meanings. This is a particular issue because of black identity, post-immigration after the 60s, which affected the sense of groups that are seen as problematic, and the idea of cultural conflict. The famous Rivers of Blood speech is the backdrop, the historical backdrop to this issue. Okay, so in criticising the neo-Marxist view of the police and courts, we could firstly say that where they say that the police and courts serve the rich and the needs of the ruling class, this could be seen as ignoring how the police and courts can actually serve the needs of other groups. For example, people like Jeffrey Archer, politicians with high status, have been criminalised by the police and courts. So you could argue that they overplay how much the poor are criminalised. The idea of Stuart Hall's study on the police and courts and mugging could be seen as overplaying the problem of choices in terms of political act and how they're labelled. And so what he was essentially saying is that they were labelled as a problem, young black males, but they're also choosing to do it as a political act, but this ignores the fact those are quite contradictory things. They're either doing it or they're not, and then we need to look at the real reasons behind that. The police and courts are not necessarily the only reason for them choosing to commit crime. The right realist might say it's to do with human selfishness and an immoral choice, not the fault of the police and courts agenda. The postmodernists would argue we live in a media-saturated society where there's a lack of consensus, there's a lot of diversity and choice, and so they might argue that neo-Marxists might ignore these changes. It's no longer possible to achieve a consensus about a social group like young black males in a world where we can make choices from the many available media outlets. In the case of the prevent strategy, it's seen as beneficial by the government, and it's linked to radicalisation agenda and the Trojan horse issue, but it can also be seen as stigmatising and marginalising Muslims, and there is the Cage Group, which is involved in trying to advocate on the behalf of those who have been targeted by the police and courts in what they see as an oppressive police state from birth to grave.